main and happy holidays. My name is Victoria Kelly. I work with training and support here at Hawks Learning, and it's a pleasure to get to help all of you today. What we're going to be focusing on is really closing out the fall term and also preparing for the upcoming semester and terms. I do have a few quick housekeeping things I'd like to go over with you all. That said, as I'm walking through an overview of how to wrap up the fall term and also prepare for the new year, please feel free to chat in any questions, as well as if you have more specific questions that you'd like to connect one-on-one with another rep on. We do actually have breakout rooms, so all you have to do is raise your hand using the emojis there at the bottom of your Zoom screen. My colleague Shriver, who is helping moderate this session, he will be able to help you get into a breakout room with one of our colleagues who can help with more of those specific questions, if you will. And then don't fret if you feel like you're missing anything. We are actually repeating the same presentation every hour on the hour. So if you miss anything that I'm going over right now, you can just jump back in with another presentation and just get caught up there, okay? And then also, just a reminder, we are raffling off 10 $50 Amazon gift cards. And if you would like to enter for your chance to win, which I encourage you to, please click the link in the chat and go ahead and fill out that survey. And we will go ahead and notify the winner via email following the event. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Lastly, I just want to give a quick overview of what we'll be covering in the next hour. We will be going over best practices to wrap up your fall sections and also prepare for your courses for the new term. So whether that's a winter mini-mester or the spring term that you're going ahead and getting a quick start on, that's what we're going to be doing here in the next hour. During that time, I'll also be reminding you how to customize your curriculum in the Hawks Instructor Gradebook, how to create a new assignment in the gradebook, as well as review some key reports that you can focus in on the springtime when those new classes start. If you, again, happen to leave in the middle of the session to speak with someone one-on-one, feel free to come back and stick around for our next presenter for anything you may have missed. With that, I would like to go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Let's see. I want to make sure I'm sharing the right screen.
No, it looks like you're showing the one with the script. I can see your desktop, so.
Oh, okay. There we go. Sorry about that. Let me move things around here. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen for a moment. Zoom is tricky, you guys. As you can see, I use a dual monitor at my desk, and so just have to switch things around so you'll have a clean view. All right, sharing again. Shriver, what do we see now?
That's perfect.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, everyone. Thank you for your patience. So as you can see on my screen, I have it on the reports tab. Before we jump into closing out our fall sections, I just want to take a moment to show you one of my favorite tools, and that is the assignment reviewer. It really is such a 5-star tool here in the reports tab, and it has so much information. I like to think of it as a one-stop shop of our reporting features. Whenever you click into your assignment reviewer, this is where you can see your students' lesson activity. You can also view this with your web test activity as well. The reason I bring that up now is because this is where you can see students' actual attempts. So as you're finalizing grades for the fall term, if you have any students who have questions about some of their grades and you want to review those with them, you can go into the particular assignment you're looking for. When you click on it, it's going to show you the student roster. You can click on that student's name and it will open up their attempt in a new tab. From here, you can review the attempt with the student. If you're in a web test view, so especially during those final exams, you can go through the test and you can actually give partial credit. So in this example, if I wanted to give half credit for these 2 points, I could here. I would just edit here and then click save. I'm not going to do that here. I just want to give you an example. I can skip through here as well. I'm going to close this tab here, and I also want to jump into the analytics feature. The analytics show us which areas of the test or assignment the students may have been struggling with as a whole. This is helpful to see as we look back at the past semester and prepare for the new. Maybe we want to reuse this exam, but make a few tweaks. This can really help us. So for example, I can see question 4, everyone got that one incorrect. Question 10 as well as these that are highlighted in the orange. We have a little color key at the top that help us differentiate those. So this can really help us see what tweaks we want to make. If you don't remember what question 4 was, no worries. You can click directly on it. It will allow you to see what that question type was. That said, I am going to go ahead and close this tab. And I'm going to go ahead and go into my own personal gradebook. This gradebook that I have pulled up is just a gradebook that we share as a team with example data. So I'm going to go ahead and pull up my own gradebook so that we can close out my fall term. And if you'd like to go ahead and pull up your gradebook as well to follow along, this is a great opportunity to do so. Now, that said, while everyone is pulling up their fall gradebooks, if you're brand new to Hawks, I just want to take a moment to welcome you to the Hawks family. What we're about to do here in a moment as we close out our fall gradebook, these aren't steps that you'll need to take at this time, but it is still good just to see what you'll be doing in future terms. So come the end of springtime, you'll be taking these steps as well, these best practices. That said, I'll definitely make sure to let you know when we're kind of switching gears and we're creating those new sections so that you can go ahead and jump on board to start creating those spring sections along with us. All right, hopefully everybody has their sections ready to go. I'm going to go ahead and go to the Tools tab. Here in the Tools tab, this is where we can see our Manage Sections area. With our managed sections, this is going to be where we can see any of our current or previous or new, if we already have created them, sections. As you can see on my screen, we can just see my A and B sections of Comp 1. This is kind of just a bird's eye view of what's going on in the course, our start and end dates. Also, if it's visible to the students. So as you can see, this is hypothetically ending next week, but of course these are fake courses, so it's okay for us to go ahead and proceed. That said, if you are ending your course next week, I definitely want to remind you to make sure that you keep this visible to your students until that time has closed. So that said, if we want to go ahead and create a new section, we can click add new section. But before that, I do want to take a moment to go back to the Tools tab and show you all how to break the LMS link between your Canvas, Moodle, Brightspace, or Blackboard. Those are the different LMS platforms that we work with, and Hawks. So if you don't currently partner with Hawks in your LMS, then you can just take a pause here. But those of you who do use that feature with syncing those grades over, we do want to go ahead and break the link. So we're going to do that here under the Tools tab and Reset Gradebooks. Now, when we look at this, we're only going to click a few things, okay? We're only going to click Remove Section LMS Associations, if any. From here, we're going to click the sections that we want to do that for. For me, I'm just going to do both. I'm going to click Reset Gradebook. I'll click OK. I'm not going to right now because it will go ahead and start going ahead and archiving the gradebook, and I want to show you guys how to do that separately. Once you've done that, we'll go back to the Tools tab, okay? Right underneath that Reset Gradebook, I want to point out the Archive Gradebook. Now, you may ask, why do I need to do that? I already have my grades in an Excel file, or I have them in my LMS. Well, it's always great to have everything tucked away safely, right? So this is a way you can do that pretty quickly. So by clicking the Archive Gradebook, we can give our archive a description. I'm just going to name this Fall 2022. You can give it more specific information if you would like, and then we'll click Archive Gradebook. I will go ahead and do that. You'll see this little loading bar here. It will just take a moment. And once that's finished up, we will go back to our sections. I did want to show you all this before we made any changes, just so, again, we have all of that data nice and safe and sound. That said, let's go ahead and go back to the Tools tab and back to our Manage sections. Before we add a brand new section for, say, our winter semester or our spring term, I want to just take a moment to pause and make a note that this is a perfect opportunity for you to create a section that's for an incomplete student. So if a student needs to continue working throughout, say, the rest of December into mid-January, or however long you guys have deemed necessary, this is where we can make those accommodations. You really have two options here. What you could do is allow the student to remain in the same section. If you do that, you'll want to make sure that your section is allowing the students to continue working after this date. Best practice we recommend when creating your section is going ahead and closing your assignment acceptance after the end date. But if you want your student to remain in that section to continue working, you can uncheck these and create our click Save Changes. That said, your alternative option, and one that I would actually recommend just for organizational purposes, would be to create a separate section by making a copy of your original. That way you can move your student into that section and just have that nice and tidy and totally separate from all of your other sections. That said, if you wanted to do that, you would click Add New Section. Using this gray box, we can click to select the section that we want to copy from. In this case, my sections are the exact same. They're carbon copies, so it doesn't matter for this example for me, but you may have different ones. I recommend making the copy from the section you know that your incomplete student is in currently. It'll ask you if you want to copy these basic settings. You can click yes, but what we want to do is we want to make sure we change that end date. So if you know an end date for the incomplete student, you can go ahead and enter that. If not, you can go ahead and put an estimate date and then maybe consider unchecking these options here. I am going to go ahead and label this here. And I'm going to just pretend that the student's name is Smith, who needs to be moved. And I will, actually, I'm going to use my maiden name, Nielsen, because we're going to look here in a moment on how we can move my account into that section. So I'm going to say fall 22, my last name, incomplete. Of course, you can label this however you feel is necessary. I am going to go ahead and put my date into mid-January. And just to be safe, I'm going to uncheck those and save my changes. So what we're doing is we're just pulling everything over from what we were working on in the fall. And we're putting that into the incomplete section. Now that it's totally separate, if I need to make any changes, it's not going to affect any of those other sections at all. That student will be in that one section. It'll just be a little bit easier for me to manage. So those are those two options that we have when creating our incomplete options. That said, I do want to take another moment here just to show you how you can also edit the dates and the scores for a single student. So we'll continue talking about Nielsen here, my maiden name. We'll look at my grades and we'll see how we can edit those. So to do that, we'll go to the assignments tab. And we'll go to edit scores by student. Now I'm going to go ahead and choose my name in the drop-down menu. It is my name here in this case. Of course, it would be your student's name. And this is where I can adjust those dates here for the student. Also, if I'm looking back and I say, this student got a late penalty, but I know that they had a special situation going on, I want to shave off that late penalty. This is also the location where you can say, let's bypass that late penalty. Let's give them full credit. If you wanted to do this for all of your students at one time, you could do this under the assignments tab and edit scores by assignment. Also, if you had a student, for example, an incomplete student, you wanted to go ahead and change the test time and date for them, you can go to the web test area. You can choose your test. And then from there, you can go to student settings by test. From here, you would want to search the student's name for which you would want to make the accommodations. From here, I would just change the date. So I'm just going to move this forward, say a week. And then save the changes. This is also a good place to come to if you have students who need additional time during the test. So not just the end date, but maybe during that test time, they need time and a half. You can adjust that test length on a per student level. That said, I would like to go ahead and just pause from our discussion of working with incomplete students and go ahead and switch gears into how we create a brand new section for our spring term or our winter term. So we're going to go ahead and switch gears a little bit. We're going to go back to the tools tab. That said, if you're brand new to Hawks and you're just now creating your section, this is a perfect time to go ahead and start following along with me. I'm going to go back to manage sections and I'm going to click add new section. If you're a returning instructor with Hawks, you can go ahead and create your section by making a copy, similar to what you just did or saw with the incomplete section. It's a great way to go ahead and start getting everything ready to go without having to start from scratch. But just in case we have some instructors who choose not to copy or maybe are brand new and don't have anything to copy yet, I do want to make sure I accommodate for all of our viewers. So that said, we want to make sure we enter our section name. I do encourage you to make this as specific as possible, ideally really matching the CRN information on the student's schedule. So whatever they're seeing on their schedule, we want to make sure it's mirroring that so that there's no confusion of where they end up registering. That said, if they end up in the wrong section, we're happy to help them transfer. But by making the section name as specific as possible, that can really help eliminate some of those confusing moments when it comes to registration. So I'm just going to name this English Comp 1-A Spring 23. So here I have the course name, my section name, and then the term. We're meeting online, but if you would like to go ahead and enter in the class meeting times, you can certainly do that here. Then we're going to enter our section start date. I do recommend making sure that it is the date that the students have on their schedule. So we'll go ahead and put that for the 16th here. As a best practice, we do recommend not accepting the lessons or web tests before this date. The reason why is because we do offer students lifetime access with their Hawks account, which means that they can transfer into a new section and reuse their access code from the previous term. So to prevent their work from coming in with them, you can click these options and that'll prevent that work from transferring. We also want to make sure we have our end date. So let me go ahead and enter that in. Say it's May 12th. And then another best practice, as I've mentioned before, is going ahead and saying, I will not accept lessons or web tests after this date. This really just helps ensure that you're getting a clean finish whenever it comes time to wrap up the term and enter those grades. Just so you know, the time of day lessons are due by default is midnight. And you should see the appropriate time zone here. That said, if you'd like to change the time that they're due, you certainly can here. Sometimes instructors like to have that time match with, say, their lecture meeting time. And then also, I do recommend keeping it visible in the gradebook and to students. The only time we want to make sure that these are not visible is if maybe we're holding on to an older section and we just want to have it for a reference point, but we don't want it to continue popping up in the grade book as we're going through the grade book in other areas. If that's the case, then we would just click hide from gradebook and then click save changes. But again, for this purpose, I'm not going to do that. I'll just pause and draw your attention again to that gray screen, or that gray box rather. If you do want to go ahead and pull in your section settings from a previous term, you can do that here. And I will go ahead and do that. Now, since I already entered in my section information here on the left, when it says copy basic settings in this pop-up box, I'm actually going to click no, because if I clicked yes, it would override everything I just entered on the left. But as you can see, it's still pulling in the lesson due date template, my custom curriculum. If I had a late penalty or a reminders template, all of that would copy over as well. And any of my web tests that are assigned in my fall section, since I'm copying from that, they're going to be applied to my spring term as well. And don't worry, we'll look at the web test and how we can tweak those settings here in a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and click Save Changes. If you are done with your fall sections and you have archived and you don't feel like you need those sections as a reference point anymore here in the gradebook, you can click to select and then click delete here at the top. But again, only if you've archived. Make sure you've archived. I'm going to leave those for now. And I also want to just point out again, if you want to hold on to those just for a reference point, but you don't want them to keep popping up in the grade book, you can click hide section. You'll still see them here in this list, but as you go through the grade book in those other areas, the old sections will not continue to pop up, okay? All right, so that said, we created our new spring section. If you have more than one spring section and you plan to have the same thing, the same templates, the same curriculum, the same tests across all of your sections, I recommend going ahead and setting up one section and then making sure everything is ready to go, all tweaks are completed, and then coming back to this area, creating your other subsequent sections and using that copy tool to make sure you've pulled in what you just worked on and applying it to your new sections. That's my personal recommendation. I think it's definitely a good time saver. So that said, let's just focus on the one that we just created. And that said, what we're going to do next is we're going to go to the assignments tab. Of course, the assignments tab is where we spend a lot of our time as instructors, because this is where we're making sure the assignments are reflecting our objectives and the dates are just so. And of course, if we copied over from the fall, we have our fall dates applied right now. So we definitely want to make sure we update that. So I'll show you an easy way to do that by going to your lesson due dates. I'm going to click on my spring section. If you're brand new to Hawks and you didn't have anything to copy, this will be completely blank, okay? So you can go ahead and enter in your due date name here at the top. And then you can go ahead and start entering those due dates. To enter a due date, it's really quite simple. All you have to do is click into that box with your cursor and use your keypad to type in a date. So in this example, you can see I had August 15th, 2022, or alternatively, I can use my calendar feature. That's personally my favorite because then you can see what day of the week it falls on, and then you can enter it that way. Now, that said, if you want, you can go ahead and just highlight and delete and go line by line to change your dates. However, there is an easier way if you copied from the fall, and that is with our Shift Multiple Due Dates. This Shift Multiple Due Dates tool will allow us to choose our first lesson we want to shift. So in this case, it was lesson 1.2, and that was a due date of, I have to look closely, yes, the 15th. And from here, you can see it highlights everything below. And in step 2, I'm going to decide where I would like that first due date to be in my spring section. So we started, I think I put the 16th. So let's set the first due date for homework to be on the 23rd. And as you can see in this finish area, it says every due date on or after that date that we chose in step 1 will be moved forward that many days. And then I'll just click go, and then everything has been moved forward to the spring. Really saved me a lot of time versus having to go line by line. That said, I am going to go ahead and change this due date name because it's no longer my fall. And I'll click Save Changes. I am going to get this due date warning because I'm working off of a fall template. Since I don't want what I just did to apply to those fall sections that I am still finishing up, I am going to click No. And what this is going to do is create a copy of my template and apply it to my spring section. There we go. And we can see that here. If I click back to manage due dates, I can see the spring is holding on to a separate spring template versus my fall. has the fall due dates. All right. Now, what I'd like to look at is our web test settings. If you use that copy tool, all the web tests that you had assigned to the fall and all of their settings have been applied to the spring, which is great, but we need to change those dates, right? Also, you may be considering changing some of the questions since you looked at that assignment reviewer tool that we looked at the top of the hour. That said, we'll go to assignments and web test. As it loads, you'll notice it is currently assigned because we see this link here. I do want to just point out, if you are making any changes to an existing test, you have to unassign it. So if you want to unassign a test, you'll click to select, you'll click the assign button, check your sections, and click unassign. That said, you also have the option of just making a copy. So maybe you want to just hold on to this for reference and make a copy just so that you're not starting from scratch, but that way you can make tweaks separately from this original test. To make a copy, you would go to manage and copy. So now we can see we have copy 1 of midterm exam fall 22. From here, if I want to continue in editing that test, changing some of the questions, I would just click this edit button. It will open up that test builder in a new tab. Also, if I want to go ahead and change the name, I can click to highlight and click details and change that name. So I'm just going to go ahead and take that copy of out. That looks a little messy, and change this to spring 23 and save my changes. Now, that said, if hypothetically we did want to just hold on to everything we had for the fall, or that we did in the fall for our midterm and just apply it to the spring, we don't want to change any questions, we just want to change that date, we would make sure to, let's see, let me go back here and check that. We would go ahead and highlight our fall 22 exam, so the original one here. Then we would go to general settings. When we open general settings, we can see the sections that it's currently applied to. In my case, it's all of my sections, including that incomplete one that we have here. That said, for my spring, definitely don't want those fall dates, right? So if I think we'll probably do our midterm, say March 6th, I can go ahead and set that date. You can always come back and change that if you'd like. I'll just keep it open from 10 to 3:30 like we did this previous term. It's currently being housed in my test assignment group. I like what that looks like. So I'll go ahead and save my changes. So now if the student saw their midterm and their student to-do list, they're not going to see an overdue assignment with the fall dates. Instead, they'll see it's in the future, it's in March. That said, I do want to take a moment and just review how to create a test from scratch since we're here in the web test area. Because if you're following along and you're brand new to Hawks, then you may have come to this page and it was blank. You didn't have a test bank yet, and that's okay. You will, because I'm going to show you how to create a test. That said, before I show you, I do want to point out your test will be located under the My Web Test. And then if you and your colleagues prefer to share test, you'll be able to see your colleagues' test here in the All Web Test. I currently in this gradebook do not have any shared tests, so mine did not really change when I clicked that, but you may notice if you're brand new and you click on All Web Tests, that changes a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and click on Create New, and we'll go ahead and create a test together. As I clicked Create New, our assignment builder tool opened up in a new tab. as it loaded, you'll see we have a dual pane view. On the left, we have our collapsed curriculum, and on the right, it's a blank slate. Now, here on the left, we have an option of clicking the default curriculum or our custom curriculum. Now, I recommend pulling from your custom curriculum because this ensures that you're pulling questions that you are working through with the students in their homework lessons. So that said, I am going to click on that one myself. As you click on the curriculum, you'll see the table of contents, and this expands. So, for example, if I wanted to make a Unit 1 test, we're covering chapters 1 and 2. It could be as simple as expanding chapter 1 and saying, I want to cover this lesson and this one and this one and this one, and saying I want to add 8 questions from those selected lessons and click add. It'll go ahead and pull over questions into my blanks, which was once my blank slate, into this test area here. So you can see we have 8 questions. That said, I also want to pull 8 questions from chapter 2. So let me go ahead and uncheck those, collapse that, and open up my chapter 2. We actually covered all of these lessons. So I'm going to click, keep that add 8 here, and then click add. I'm going to pull over those questions into my test area. Now I have a total of 16 questions. Maybe originally I had in mind just 15 questions. Maybe we want to remove one of those. So I can scroll through on the right, see which ones I may want to remove or replace. That said, if I do want to handpick a question from a particular lesson, I can click directly on the lesson and it will expand to show me all of the available questions. So here we can see the different question types in a preview. I can see which ones I already actually have in use because this is a little bit of a long list. So instead of having to scroll through, I can just see at a quick glance, this one's already in use. And then if I wanted to add, I can just click add. But we're wanting to remove. So if I wanted to remove this one, I would just click this little circle. It has a minus button, a minus sign in the middle, and that will go ahead and remove that question. And now I'm at 15 questions with 30 points total. This is a web test, so I can change the point value per step. Some of our questions do have multi-steps available, so that's why you see per step in this case. We can also do half credit. So if I wanted to do 0.5 instead of 1 point, I can do that as well. I am going to just leave it as 2. And I also want to point out that we have the bonus feature. So if you wanted students to have a bonus opportunity, you can do that here and adjust the points. That would be bonus. Just so you know, we do present our questions in a random order. Each of these questions have multiple iterations. That really just helps keep the integrity of the test and also the challenge as well. So that said, if you did want to maybe change that experience for the students, you can block the value and also lock the order. I do actually recommend that if you're planning to print the test. Although the name implies online testing, a web test, you can print these as well for paper pencil administration. So if you're going to do that, I do recommend going ahead and locking the value and locking the orders, that when you come back to review, it's the same as what you were viewing before. So if we wanted to lock the order and value, we would click action, select all, lock order here, and then also actions, lock value. At this point, I would like to also point out that we also have cluster options available as well. Now, clustering is something that sometimes instructors like to use for maybe final exams, just to again help with that extra challenge, and also keeping it fresh for each student. So if I wanted to say, and let me just deselect these for a moment, just to briefly talk about clusters. Let's say I wanted to cluster these 3 questions. I would just click those 3, click actions, and click cluster. And what that's going to do is it's going to allow the question to be clustered together so that whenever each student is taking the test, it's going to pull a question from that cluster for each student, and that's going to be at random. So it's just going to help, again, keep it fresh and new for each student. So some instructors like to use that for final exams. Also, if you wanted to decluster, so maybe you change your mind, that option's right there. I do want to point out that clustering the questions will affect the total number of questions and the total number of points on the test. So it's just something to keep in mind whenever you're evaluating your tests before actually submitting it to your section. Okay. So did want to just point that out as well. I think for now, I like what I have. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'm going to click save as. I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to say midterm. Oh no, we said we were making a unit test. So unit 1 test. And I'm going to just name this spring 2023 and save. Now, again, as long as this is not assigned yet to your section, you can come back and keep making changes. But if it's assigned, it is locked for changes, okay? So if you're working on this and it's mid-morning and you say, oh goodness, it's time for lunch, I need to run, and you come back, just make sure you save your changes and then you can come back and keep on working on it, okay? From here, I'm going to go ahead and close my tab, and I'm going to go back here. I'm going to click refresh test list. Now I can see my new test. That's one we were working on. So let's say you just came back from lunch, you want to keep working on it. You'll click on that edit button. It'll open that tab back up. And you can pick up where you left off, and you can just save as you go. But let's say you're ready to go. You're ready to get this assigned to your new spring section. We'll click to select. We'll have our settings area pop up here. We already looked at our general settings earlier. So this is where we set up the open and close time and date, as well as the length of time the test is open. We talked about how if it's a student accommodation that we need to adjust, we can do that for individual students with our student settings by test. We have prerequisite options available, so you can set that up here. And what that may look like is, well, for my Unit 1 test, I want to make sure all of my students have completed all of their Unit 1 homework before the test is open. You can set that up here in prereqs. Additional settings is something I do want to take a moment to check on together, because here at the top, you'll see it says release grades to student in the review. You have options of when that grade and review will be released. I'd like to just point out, though, that by default, we have the review released immediately, and then also the answer displayed in the review. So if you have locked the order and the values and you have the test open for, say, a 24-hour period, if you have it set for them to open, those answers could get out there. So just to help protect the integrity of your test, you may consider only allowing the students to review the test after the end date and time of the test, just to make sure all of the test submissions have been submitted for you to review. And then they can go ahead and review that test and see maybe incorrect versus correct answers. So just something I always like to pause and draw our instructors' attention to, just something to think about. Also, something to think about is our Respond to Lockdown browser partnership. So this is where you can allow students to have the lockdown browser requirement for them to open their test. Again, protecting the integrity of your test time. This would prevent the students from being able to open up any other tabs or applications or windows as they're taking their test. They're, just as the name implies, locked in on that browser page while they're completing the test. Once the duration of the test is completed and they click submit, then they can continue working in their browser, maybe go check their email, etc., immediately after hitting submit. I will just say though that Lockdown Browser is a free application. They can click and download it. If you enable this for your students, they're going to be prompted to download the latest version. So they're going to have that free download opportunity from the get-go, and we lead them through it in the steps on the student side. So just something to consider. We also have diagnostic testing available, and that's under the additional settings. Once we have our settings ready to go, we would click Assign, choose our section that we want to assign it to. I'm going to choose my new spring section and click Assign. That said, I do want to make sure that we have time to review how to customize our curriculum. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the Assignments tab, and we'll go to the curriculum. It is sandwiched between the buttons that we've already clicked here. So let's go to our curriculum. Now, as you can see for my spring term, we pulled in my custom curriculum from the fall. Some things I want to point out here are that we have our global settings at the top. Global just means that this will go into effect for all of our lessons. So anything you set up here, it's going to be all of the lessons in total. Whereas if you want to adjust per lesson, that's going to be here in the table of contents. And you may look at this and go, oh my goodness, I'm not planning to actually assign the entire table of contents. Why am I seeing all of the table of contents here? No worries. Your students are only going to see on their to-do list what you have assigned in the lesson due dates area. So what we looked at earlier with those dates. We just have the entire table of contents here so that you have it available if you want to go ahead and make those adjustments. That said, let's just go ahead and click on this first lesson. It'll open up in a new tab in our lesson builder tool. It's going to look somewhat similar to what we were seeing earlier in assignment builder. However, this is our Learn, Practice, Certify homework lesson. So here we do have a dual pane view, just like in the assignment builder. And we have our question bank on the left and our chosen questions on the right. Again, similar situation. We can choose which questions we want from the left by clicking add or checking multiple at one time and clicking add at the top. And then similarly, we can click remove here on the right. Now, since these are my Learn, Practice, Certify lessons, I can choose the mastery level since these homework lessons are mastery approach. That said, my strikes will go ahead and automatically allocate according to the mastery level that I have set. And this may change according to however many questions and steps that you have chosen for the lesson. In this particular example, it's 10 questions and 10 steps. One thing I'd like to point out too is under the settings area, you can open up the Learn pages. And this would allow us to see the Learn pages just for this particular lesson. From there, I can embed links to my own videos, add my own footnotes if I'd like, hide pages of content that maybe we're not covering in that lesson so that we're really condensing it down to what the students are needing to focus on. And then lastly, make sure you save your changes. And that's here in the lower right-hand corner. I didn't make any changes, so I can just close this tab here. Here at the top, again, I mentioned the global settings. So a few I want to point out here are the option to require practice. By default, learn and practice are not required components of the lesson. We certainly encourage students to spend that time and learn and practice so that by the time they get certified, they feel confident and comfortable to demonstrate their mastery of the lesson objectives. However, some students go ahead and jump straight into certify, and maybe they're unsuccessful. At that time, we encourage them to go into a specialized practice mode based on areas that they've struggled with in their certified attempt. But it's not required by default. So if you want to require that practice, you can do so here. You can check allow students to unsuccessfully attempt certify, adjust how many times before requiring practice. So here I just have one time and 80%. So if I was unsuccessful with my first certified attempt, before I can try again, I need to go back into that specialized practice area that Hawks prompts me to complete at least 80% of it, and then my certified attempt will renew and I can try again. Of course, if I show that I mastered that lesson, then that's great, and I will get to have a full 100 for that lesson. Some instructors like to go ahead and allow or require rather students to have practice from the get-go. So in that case, this 1 would turn into a 0, and maybe they want 100% of practice. We can change that here too. We also have in our beta form right now our enhanced practice sessions. This would just allow the student to have a more customized approach with their homework based on our historical content, as well as their historical experience so far in the homework lesson. So it really just tailors it even more to the student's experience. Also, we have flex mastery. Now, with the mastery approach, we're really trying to see, has the student mastered the concepts, the learning objectives in this lesson? But we also know mistakes happen, especially type errors, right? So if you want students to retry a missed question with new values instead of receiving a strike, essentially it's just going to give them a new iteration of the question, same question type, so we can still see if they understand that particular objective with this similar question type. And that would prevent them from having to take a strike instead. I'm going to go ahead and change this to say spring 23 and save. Now that said, I do want to just point out, if you're brand new to Hawks, and I apologize, I'm just now pointing this out, when you clicked on the curriculum area, you may have noticed that the lessons were not available to click on. They were just a list and they were not hyperlinked. This will change whenever you create a name. So go ahead and enter a name, click save, and then these will become hyperlinked for you to open individually. That said, I do want to point out a few other areas that you may have customized in the fall or you're considering for the spring. So that said, I'm going to go back into the Tools tab for a moment. And don't worry, we're not going back to manage sections because I know we'd spent a lot of time there. We're going to go to communications. Communications offers us the option to set up a reminders template. This is a really popular feature among our instructors. This is where we can choose to send automatic reminders to our students, say 2 days before their homework is due. Certification is just our fancy word for homework around here. And you can see in the brackets, anything that you see here will auto-populate. So it really comes across as a personalized email that you took a moment to send to the student, but we'll keep it our secret that it is an automatic email. I'm just going to name this reminder, so it's a template that I can apply to my other sections in the future. Another area I would like to point out is the grade settings area. With grade settings, you can adjust your assignment groups to match your syllabus. We definitely recommend matching your syllabus here, as well as if you're partnering with that LMS and we're going to be syncing the grades, you want to make sure whatever you have in assignment groups matches what you have in, say, Canvas or Blackboard. So this is where you can adjust those weights here. You can also add new groups here, maybe even make a bonus group if you would like. If you click rearrange, this will allow you to drag and drop different assignments into other areas. Additionally, under the grade settings tab, we have a late penalty. By default, we do not have a late penalty applied. So if that's something that you envision for your course, you'll want to make sure you come to grade settings and late penalty. With our late penalty, we have flexible options. So we can have it a fixed penalty. So we're not accepting late credit or late work at all. It would be 0 credit. In this case, we would just keep it a fixed penalty with 100% penalty value. Alternatively, we can make a graduated penalty where we kind of stagger it according to the amount of time that has passed with us submitting our assignment late. So for example, I could say 10% for the first day it's late, 20% for the second day it's late, 30% for the third day it's late, and then after 3 days, we're not accepting late work at all. So that's just an example of how you can manipulate that feature for what you envision for your late penalties. That said, I do want to just take a moment and point out before we proceed to a quick reports overview, how you can transfer your student who may be taking an incomplete into the incomplete course. If you go to your tools tab, you have the manage students area. This will allow you to see your list of students. And then from there, you can transfer them into the incomplete section. And then click transfer. So I did want to just take a moment to point that out here. This opened in a new tab, so I'm just going to go ahead and close that out. We'll go ahead and go back to the reports tab, but again, with it being the reports, there's data to review, and this is, as you can see, a very example gradebook. So I'm going to go back to that shared gradebook we use as a team with example data to go back to our reports area. So in this reports overview, I just want to point out some reports that you likely are familiar with, or maybe you aren't familiar with, and they'd be really helpful to explore for the spring term. And that is our all student scores. All student scores is a hawk's eye view, pun intended, of what's going on in the course. This is where we can see the final grade, the letter grade, and then we can expand our assignment groups to see how our students are doing in each individual assignment. Here we have a colorful view of bubbles. And if we look at our show legend, we can see what those colorful bubbles mean. So here we can see orange is past due. Green is what we love to see, it was completed on time. Yellow means it was completed late. So if you have that late penalty, that has kicked in, right? And so if we wanted to maybe review an assignment or maybe shave off that late penalty, we can click on the bubble and we can push out the due date, or we can adjust the score so that the late penalty is shaved off. We can also review the assignment. So if we have a student email and they say, you know, I was really having trouble on question 5 on lesson 1.1, I can click review assignment. It will bring me to my assignment reviewer, which is actually where we started today in the presentation. And that would allow me to see their exact attempt and see which questions number 5 was, and also which values were they working with. Additionally, in reports, we have the detailed student grades. It's essentially what we were just looking at, but on a per student level. So this is especially helpful for one-to-one office hour visits. So if a student comes in and says, I'm concerned about ABC grade, I can pull that up and we can just talk through that. And it'll also allow me to review the assignments. Also, I do want to point out our search by criteria. This will be where I wrap up today. If you haven't seen this tool, it is definitely one of my favorites because a huge part of an instructor's job is really monitoring how the class is doing and looking for any gaps of where students may be falling behind and trying to meet students where they're at. And this tool really helps with the efficiency of that process. Search by criteria allows us to look at the grades or activity or both for a student. And from there, it allows us to quickly reach out to them. So for example, I could say, I want to look at students with a grade between 0 and 75 and students who haven't logged in 5 days. I can filter that report. Thankfully, only one student falls into that category. But it has been 5 days since she may have logged in, and I want to make sure that she's checking in and doing her assignments. So I can click here. If it was a list of students, I could click to highlight everyone and send a message to remind them to sign in. That said, I do want to digress and just thank you so much for your time today and for coming to the workshop. I hope that today's presentation was helpful to you. And I see that my colleague Faith has joined us. I'm going to hand the mic over to Faith. Thank you, everyone, and happy holidays.
Thank you so much, Victoria. And thank you, everyone, so much for joining us today. Over the next hour or so, I will be walking through a few key topics that will help you wrap up your fall sections and ensure that you are set up and ready to go for the new term. As I am walking through an overview of how to get your sections ready, I do invite you to log into your account and follow along live so that by the end of our hour together, you are ready to get started for this semester. Before we do get started, I do want to mention a few logistical reminders. My colleague Shriver is here monitoring the session. Thank you, Shriver. And as you are walking through the section setup process with me, if you have any questions, please feel free to enter those into the chat box and we'll answer them live. Additionally, if you're interested in meeting with a member of our team one-on-one to get help with something specific, please raise your hand and use the reaction buttons at the bottom of the Zoom, and we can get you into a breakout room with one of our trainers. We're also raffling off 10 $50 Amazon gift cards. To enter for a chance to win, please click the link in the chat and fill out the survey. We'll notify the winner via email following the event. Lastly, I'll be going through the following topics over the next hour. First, the best practices to wrap up your fall sections and prepare your course for the new term. Next, customizing your course curriculum. And then we'll go over creating a new assignment. And finally, just a few key reports to focus on in the spring. If you happen to leave in the middle of the session to speak with someone in a breakout room, we will be repeating this workshop, so feel free to jump back in. And with that, I'll go ahead and get started. Shriver, if you don't mind just letting me know that the screen is shared, should be good now.
Looks good.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. I first wanted to begin by talking about how you can review previous semester data, set up like an incomplete section, and how to edit scores for a single student. So to review for that, you will jump into your gradebook. And I want to point out real quick too, just a quick reminder that up here in the top right-hand corner, we have the instructor dashboard, which what you're viewing right now, but you can also click on the student dashboard. Now to jump into a gradebook, you just click on one of your products here. If you have multiple, it may look like mine. If you have one, you may just have one here. From here, you can actually, like I said, we're going to review the previous semester student data, and we're going to do that by going to reports. And we're going to check out this lovely report at the end here, which is assignment reviewer. Using this tool, is where you can see the overall course performance and a detailed breakdown on the course performance per assignment. This is where you can view commonly missed questions on web tests and lessons. All right, here you can see we're on the lessons and we see web tests by clicking here. And you